This is the Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition, and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think, and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. By Chris Hart. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Rhodri Jones. Rhodri is a psychological fitness specialist and has over 20 years of practical experience in the field of human performance. Firstly, as a professional footballer with Manchester United and Rotherham, and consequently as a drama, television director and documentary filmmaker. I'm used to being in the middle of high-performing, high-achieving, high-intensity environments, and I'm used to dealing with people from all walks of life. So welcome onto the show, Rhodri.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. So if we go right back to the beginning and kind of your formative days at Manchester United, because we talked about a little bit off air about this, was that always the dream for you to go play for that club?
Yeah, it was always a dream. I think I picked up a football when I was about 4 or 5, and you know how it is. It just taps into something deep in you. And at the time, they weren't that successful as a club. I think Ferguson come in '86, so you know that was culminated. You know, kind of coincided to when the interest started. And then I think it was they had like a Captain Brian Robson who was like I should just admire him. And then I think through that the love for United started. And then I was one of those. I was the one who cried when they lost, and you know, would really affect me for days and stuff. And then I just started playing for Cardiff Schoolboys, I think, because it was like a representative team locally. And then you've got like a network of scouts all over the country. So it was like a point where my mum was like a secretary. I had like calls from different clubs every week. And I kind of knew there was a United scout in the area, but it was a bit, you know, it was a bit quiet for a while. I didn't know what he looked like, so I didn't know who to look out for. And then, yeah, I had the call. My mum had received a call one day and said, the scout said, "Would you like to come on trial?" There's a series of trial periods. But I don't think, you know, there's always that moment you think, oh yeah, it's going to be amazing. But it was always a part of me who was like, oh yeah, this is amazing. I don't want to let people down now. And it was even to the point, my brother, massive Man U fan, 2 years above me. My dad was a massive Man U fan. I idolised him growing up. And there's part of me that felt a bit guilty. I'll be honest, it was a bit like, God, they would love that opportunity. And even though they didn't make me feel bad, they always supported me. I felt a bit like, why me and not them a little bit? And so that's not probably like a good place to start from, really. But I was lucky to go through the trials. And yeah, I ended up signing a scholarship, which meant leaving home at 16, spending 3 seasons up there. And it was in one of the golden years of the club. It was during when they won the treble in '99. So it was a great time to be at the club. As a youngster, you know, when you're looking at your path through to the first team and you're seeing like one of the best, you know, squads in the history, it was quite daunting. But people ask me like, well, what was it like being at the club? And honestly, you know, Ferguson he'd know your mum's name, he'd know your dad's name, he'd know your brother's name. It was this attention to detail more than anything. I honestly say it was, you know, arguably the biggest club in the world, up there with Barcelona and Real Madrid at the time. But within the club, it felt like you were in a Sunday League team, because it was you were mixing with the first team, and there was kind of local guys doing the kit and in the canteen. So it felt like a really family atmosphere. I mean, I know Ferguson was you know, renowned for his siege mentality, where he'd built this kind of united against the world mentality. But within it, it felt like maybe it was all part of it, that he just wanted to feel like everyone's against United. But within the club, it's a family feeling, and everyone's obviously competitive, but there's no airs and graces, and you really did feel that.
And you talk about, the family atmosphere. Do you think it's an outside bias of when, and I'll use David Beckham because it's the biggest one of them all, when he became too big for the club, obviously you're gone. What's that like from the internal perspective?
I think, you're always aware that United's bigger than any individual. I think modesty. There was a big thing about not expressing yourself, but not drawing attention to yourself. So yeah, express yourself by all means on the pitch, but remember where you are in life as well. And you did feel that with even with the first team, they would obviously you'd look up to them and admire and achieve what they were doing, but because you weren't segregated from them, you weren't, we obviously were aspiring to be where they were, but you didn't feel like you were inferior in any regard. As I say, Ferguson would walk past apprentices and speak to them obviously he'd have more to discuss with obviously the first team, but he'd still show an interest, and I just feel that was partly down to the success, really.
And what was it like once? Because you talked about the highs of probably living out the fantasies of both your brother and your father. What was the low like being released by them and going to, not released, but being ultimately sold to another club?
Yeah, I'd had a few lows anyway. I mean, I was there for 3 seasons. My first 2 seasons, I had bad knee problems, so I'd missed the first half of both seasons. Now you need luck to succeed at United. You can have the talent, but you need a degree of luck. So straight away you kind of know you're playing catch up a little bit. But it was odd, really. In my third year there, my form was pretty good, and I had no indication that you have monthly meetings with your coach, and no point was I said, "Oh, you need to do this. You're in danger." So I went in to see Ferguson. I mean, it's an odd one. Ferguson himself, he went to see to find out he had a contract with or not, if they were offering a contract. And I hadn't had really much dealings with him day to day because I was training with the reserves, and sometimes he'd go and train a little bit with the first team when they needed a few more numbers and to for their drills or whatever. But honestly, I'd never been in his office before. So I'd gone in, and then you're half trying to soak in just the gaffer's office, the manager's office, and trying to see what he's got dotted around the place, what little memorabilia, and then who he's trying to sign if he's got any names up on his board. But then, it was a little bit of a blur, to be honest. I mean, I can't remember exactly the words, but I do remember him saying, "Rhodri won't be offering you a contract." And my first thought was, I don't want to cry in front of this guy. I mean, it's a weird one for him because he's used to, motivating his team in the dressing room. There was a famous hair dry treatment where he's really, grill his players, but there's not much you can say for what was 19, 20, a guy who's basically ended his dreams at United. And honestly, I always thought at the time, it's just football, but I probably suffered a little bit of trauma from that whole experience, bearing in mind this was a guy who I'd idolized since I was 4 or 5, so it wasn't like someone who'd just been in a manager for a year, and I built up such a I idolized this guy. So for him to say, "I'm not offering you a new contract," in my head I heard, "You're not good enough," not just as a footballer but as a person. Then you start to leave the room, and then you think, there's a couple of players who've had a new contract and you haven't, so you're crying. They're trying to console you while happy that they've got another contract. Then you're thinking, "Oh well, I feel like I've let my parents, my family down, or my friends," and then you start suddenly. So I wouldn't really open up to my parents because I felt like, one, I don't want them to worry about me, and two, you feel like you let them down. Now this isn't true, that my parents didn't give me reason to. But I was just building up this little prison in my mind. And what I would say is I thought it was reflective at the time. there was no kind of psychological support. And this is, one of the biggest club in the world. Yeah, they support you in finding another club, but that's just an exterior thing. That there was nothing actually to go through. Well, how do you deal with this? I felt like I was just I was in the dark a little bit and just trying to find the light and didn't really know where to turn a little bit. I know you have to take responsibility for yourself, but when you're young like that, 19, 20, there's a lot going on, and then sometimes it takes someone just to show you a different way. But because I didn't, it was a little bit tough. I mean, I didn't really want to know the reasons why I got released, but obviously my parents wanted to, because I'd left home at 16, and my parents had entrusted me with a club. And I think my dad saw Sir Alex at I think it was a charity event, and he said Rodri's got the talent, but it's between the ears. And I was like, yeah, that's undoubtedly correct. I was an overthinker. I was hard on myself, a bit of a perfectionist. But even then, I was thinking, well, you can work on that. Surely that's not just, we hadn't had any training in this regard, and no mental fitness work, or it was, they started to employ a physical conditioning coach, and even had like a woman there who'd test your vision and your periphery, all the other bases, you had your body fat tested, everything else. And I'd argue a lot of it is in the mind, especially elite performance. And there wasn't anything in that regard. Now, I thought, maybe it's just reflective of the era, and but it still seems like maybe some, like in American stuff, you see more like mental conditioning coaches. It seems to be more normal, where I think maybe in the UK we're playing catch up. So I joined Rotherham, who were not Premier League. They were a division below at the time, and honestly, it'd have been great for me to say, yeah, I'm going to prove Fergie wrong. And yeah, that would have been great as part of the story. But I was honestly going there still recovering, really, to be honest with you. And it was tough. I was a young boy far away from home, and didn't really talk to anyone. And then, yeah, in Rotherham, it went a bit darker there.
And you talked about this, and I loved your vulnerability. You posted a bit on LinkedIn about if you had Ian Holloway as a manager, it would have been a little bit more of a helpful time in that dark period.
Yeah, Ian Holloway tried to sign me once when I was at United. He was at Bristol Rovers as a manager. He tried to sign me on loan, but I think United had refused because I'd lost a lot of football because of injury. They just wanted to keep me within the fold so where they could keep an eye on me. So when I got released, he'd actually took over at QPR, Queen's Park Rangers, and he rang me, and he took about an hour to speak to me, and I've said it's a long time ago. I don't remember the ifs and buts of the conversation, but I just remember thinking, what a decent guy this is. He was just talking to me as a human, and it didn't feel like he was trying to sell the club as such. He was just discussing life with me. And then I didn't even know then. I spoke to Dad and went, yeah, you got my number, and he gave me a call as well. So not only did he take the time to speak to me for an hour, he even rang my dad. And then the only reason I didn't sign for them is because I didn't really fancy living in London at the time. I just felt like it'd be too busy for me there at the time. But then, lo and behold, there was a player who's been quite open about his mental health difficulties. Clark Carlisle, a very very deep thinker like I am, maybe quite academic, and he suffered quite badly. And apparently, he went to Holloway, and Holloway said, I don't know what, I'm not experienced enough to be able to deal with your problems, but I'll give you every support I can. And sometimes you need that in life. And what I joined in Rotherham, the manager was really successful there, but we didn't have that relationship. He didn't really know me, and I didn't really have any human conversations with him. So when I started, what happened is I started, these thoughts of not good enough started just pounding me every day. So I'd leave training, go back to the flat I had in Rotherham, just shut the curtains and just trying to fight with these thoughts all the time. And then you're starting to think, God, like, how do I stop thinking? Think, oh, well, yeah, the only time I don't really think is consciously think is when I'm asleep. All right, how do I extend sleep? Oh, yeah, by ending it. It's not like, I want to kill myself. It's, I want to stop thinking. I feel like a prisoner in my own head and I don't know how to get out. I mean, I was fortunate. I didn't really speak to anyone at the club then. And, you know, I speak to guys now, and there were guys there who would have probably been open and be able to help me. But, you know, he's gone back 20 years ago, you know, it's like a survival thing. This is weakness. And, you know, if I said anything here, like, guys is just going to like think, oh, there you go. There's nothing about him. Even though in the dressing room anyway, I was a shell. I wouldn't really speak. I was just like going in and just trying to survive and go back to the flat and just repeating this process. So what happened? I was fortunate. I've never had I've never had like a pull towards alcohol. So there was or gambling, something that would have really pulled me out of thinking clearly, even though I had these dark thoughts. There was an inner felt experience. I can't explain it. It said you need to do something about it. And luckily, there was a doctor's surgery literally opposite my flat. So I went into the doctors. I mean, if this doctor's had been like 2 miles away, you know how it can be little things at those moments when you're not thinking clearly. But, you know, I wasn't like hampered by alcohol. There was a pub right by this doctor's surgery as well. And sometimes I'd go in there not to drink and get drunk. I just go in there not to be alone. I just like sit there because I was a bit frightened of just what would happen if I just stayed in this flat by myself. But it was an uncomfortable thing for the GP because I think he was aware who I was. You know, I was a Rotherham. He was, a Rotherham doctor, so he knew my face when I walked in. And he said, "Oh, does anyone at the club know?" No. I haven't told anyone. Told the gaffer, the manager, anyone. So basically, you know, it's an awkward thing. He's like, patient confidentiality to think about, and he's like, oh God, like, this guy hasn't really maybe mentioned it to his family, so he's like, it's an awkward one. And so I was like training then with Rotherham on antidepressants and didn't tell anyone. And I remember actually when they gave me the antidepressants, I was like, oh, Prozac, that's what people who are mad take. Like, I was thinking, oh, at least it's not Prozac, because it didn't say Prozac on the bottle. I was like, God, at least it's not Prozac, at least I'm not crazy. And then I went home, I looked on the internet, it was like the medical name for Prozac. So I was like, oh man, like I am taking Prozac here. But for me, I mean, I took it for a month, and then it was numbing me, and I thought, you know what, I just want to understand. I don't want to not to feel. I just want to understand, like, what's at the root of this? Because if I don't get to the root and stuff, I'll always be, I won't really be able to free myself of this. But honestly, I mean, I never told the manager. I remember, you know, my performances on the pitch, I just didn't want to play. I remember, you know, I'd be playing for the reserves, and I'd be playing on the pitch, and I'd just be like, I'd have to think about moving. You know, normally when you're in the flow, you're just moving effortlessly. I'd be stood there thinking, like, I've got to think about moving my arm. I've got to think about running. I wish there was a hole on the pitch just to swallow me. I'd be looking at the bench thinking, like, I just want to be there. And I've never been like that on the pitch. I've always been someone who's leads, really. It was you know, I'd notice like the floodlights would like be blinding me and stuff. I was like, we'd be playing evening games, and all throughout the day, I'd be like battering myself. And then, so, you know, they say like your brain uses 20% of your energy. I'd be arriving to games like already shattered and exhausted. So I have to see the manager. Normally when, you know, people ask to see the managers to complain, you know, players ask to see the managers, like, complain about why I'm not in the team. I was like, there's no way, I'm not complaining why I'm not in the team. There's no way, you know, my performances, and I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to survive life. So I literally went into him and I just went, you know, I still had 6-7 months left on my contract. And so that's a lot of money for, you know, I was on decent money. I think I was 21 at the time. And I said, just rip up my contract. I said, maybe I said I was homesick, or, my knee still wasn't great with Phil's. You know, I'd had so much problems with it. You know, I might have said, oh yeah, my knee, I'm still struggling with my knee, but that wasn't the real reason. And I didn't tell him. And you think like this career that you've, this dream from when you're 5 and stuff, and all these work you've done, and it ended with a whimper in the manager's office without even telling him what the real reason was. And in all fairness to him, when I said rip at my contract, he was a bit startled, because normally you would have like a player, even if he knew he didn't want to, he'd just wind down his contract, because by effectively ripping at my contract, they don't have to give me any money. I can just rip on my contract. They don't owe me anything. But for me, I was like, you know what? There's just something I need to survive. I need to look after myself here. But whether I'd have been open there, I don't know. But at the time, I didn't feel like I could do, and I feel like I had to just survive really for myself. And it's a weird thing, really. I don't really look back too much in life, but it just shows you how you can get your grips around you. And for someone who loved football, and it just started had its grips in me, and I didn't really know at the time how to evade it really. And I'm in a better position now, but back then, it wasn't a mental health awareness, and like it is now. It wasn't really like that back then.
Do you think football sets people, I'm going to say the youth, up to fail to some instances, because people got aspirations of making to the first team, when in reality for the majority that's never going to happen? And I'm talking obviously the Premier League teams.
It's a weird thing. If you were looking at it rationally, statistically, the amount of players who make it is I think it's less than 1%. But you know how it is when you're a kid. You don't look at statistics, and that's good in a way, because if everyone looked at statistics in life, people wouldn't achieve and push the boundaries. So it's a weird thing, really. I mean, what you've got with stuff like you come from a sporting background. It's like a dream vocation. It's not like a vocation you just, I happen to be interested in this. It feels like a fulfilling of a dream. So the fall of not making it is probably going to hit you harder than if you were just doing a job that you enjoyed, but it wasn't, you hadn't been dreaming about it all your life. And like football for me was somewhere where I'd go in the garden when I was 5, 6 to escape from the world. It was my safe place. It was like, when you play, when you're in the sporting arena, the rules are clear. Where sometimes life isn't. There's so many nuances, and it was a weird thing, really. I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, all I'd say now is not for me to say what the answer is, but I see you've got like academies for 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and is that really in the players' best interests, or the clubs? Because they cast the net far and wide if 1 or 2 make it. And you're always going to hear about the stories of like Foden now at Man City, and Rashford have been through from the clubs. Well, Foden knows since he was really young, 6. And my argument though is if you bought them in the fold at 11, 12, they're so gifted, you will make it. And I think what you've got now is scouting networks. They're so developed worldwide that you're not going to slip through the net, because even if you're playing for your local club, you're going to get spotted. And I know, I read interestingly that, Bayern Munich have scrapped their under 19. They're going to start under 11s because they want the players just to enjoy life and not be tied down to one sport, and just enjoy playing locally and trying different things. I heard about Roger Federer. He said similar when he was young. He was playing all kinds of sport and then veered into tennis. And what it is, it's a lot for someone who's gone, if you've gone from 6 to 16 or 6 to 18, just don't get me wrong, it's a great experience as well, but you've invested a lot of energy, a lot of time in this one sport. So, by just choosing this one sport, there's a lot of other things you can't be doing at the same time as you're doing that. So I'm not saying I've got the answer for anything, but it's a discussion worth having sometimes, because the mental health statistics in sport are quite high. You can't blame just the sport and environment for that, but what you do is maybe attracts people who they do, egos, and not in an arrogant kind of way, but guys who are looking at the golden boy, the people who are used to achieving and stuff. So there's no black and white really. There's no like immediate answer. But I just think like it goes down to society. I think, you know, you look at it. I know COVID aside, but we're essentially in a better place than we ever were. You know, in terms of our needs met generally. Yet people are not happier than they were, you know, back 50 years ago. So, well, why is that? Because maybe the answer lies is finding that peace within, whilst expressing yourself out in the world. I mean, it's taken me a while to maybe realize that is like, I think people think, oh, if you find this kind of like, you know, kind of a peace, you know, you're doing anything more from a state of joy rather than fear, that it's going to take your edge, it's going to take your ambition. But I don't know if it's the same for you. I think someone's drive is innate in you. It's inherent in you. I'm just naturally driven, but I think for a lot of my life, I was driven from trying to please others, trying to be the perfectionist, trying to, it's from a place of fear, not wanting to let people down, rather from the joy of just going for something and trying to block out society's voice. Really, is we're not taught those things, and for me, it's been kind of a slow learning experience.
I'm probably the same, Rhodri. It's my perspective on it is probably slightly different to yours. It's probably somewhere in between.
Yeah.
It's fear and joy, and probably a little bit mixture in between. But as you and I have tested, and anybody that's listened to that does the sport to a higher level, emotionally you're going into some dark energy most of the time to be able to cultivate what you need to, which in a sense is fear, anger, resentment, trying to ultimately voice your opinion on the pitch because of what somebody said on the television and things like that. That's bad. And people will say to me, clients and people outside, where do you get your motivation from? Well, that's not an easy question to answer, because it's not one answer. Because whereas it's not a word, it's not a saying, it's not a slogan, it's so complex. I think I managed to answer it on Instagram Live as best as I could. I think they were looking for a magic pill answer.
Yeah.
It was like 5 minutes long, and it probably could have been longer than that. But in terms of, we talked about music before we came on recording. Ultimately, each team will have their kind of winning song after they've got a big victory, or ultimately that players will shut themselves off to prepare. That's the ritual. You've got, I was quite surprised when you said you were shy. I'm probably very similar. We don't portray this, but either of us on this podcast, but I think we've got to know each other over probably a course of months. It's easy, like it's a chit chat.
I think it is. I think it is. When I'm passionate about something like you are, then I'm not, you know, I don't, I think when I say not shy, it's shy. I think sometimes I'll be quiet in situations where I just don't feel I'm compelled to speak. Do you know what I mean? It's like sometimes in, you know, when you meet like-minded people, it just same as in when your best performance just flows a little bit more. I think that's what it is with me.
Well, those are the people that you need to listen to. But you know, the shy ones, when they have something to say and they stand up, you better take note, sit up and take notice, because ultimately they're a little bit of a piece of advice is going, if you actually implement that, poof, it's the world's your oyster. And I'm one of those people. I have had to take a back seat at times to learn, because I do like my own voice, and people probably can probably they probably can't tell that, but be it, there's maybe one reason that I like having a podcast, because I can talk. But I've had to learn to listen, and that how I've done that in my work life is, you know, the mute button on Zoom. Turn myself off. Don't give myself any opportunity to talk. I can talk, but nobody can hear. And that's enabled me to become better at listening, because ultimately, if I do that, give myself, you know, the old school of the tape over the mouth. Ultimately, that was a punishment back in the day, or somebody's making a prank. I'll listen to what people have to say, soak it in, and then when I have something to say, they'll listen, and I do it like a religion now. It's like, yep, you're not talking, James, and then just
It's a skill, though, isn't it? It is a skill. For some people, it comes easy.
It is ego as well, because like, well, my opinion is more important than yours. I'm going to, and I did it as you were talking. My opinion is more important. My what I've got to say is more important than you, or I don't really care what you have to say because it's boring. In a nutshell. So I'm going to talk over you so we get to the juicy bit. So that's obviously giving somebody a perspective into my world in business, because it probably happens a lot. Sports. Well, you would have seen it where you had characters, Roy Keane, and ultimately still does it now on television. He says it like it is. This is what I think of the team, and he doesn't hold up. He doesn't pull back. Ultimately, he's got a point. He's probably saying what a lot of fans would like to say to the player's face. It's like, this is not good enough. If I was captain now, I wouldn't stand for it. And I think one of the things I didn't see it, I've heard about it, is ultimately if De Gea was his goalkeeper, would have kicked him in the face.
Yeah, I saw something similar. Yeah.
So that's an extreme. Would he have done that to Peter Schmeichel? I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't think they got on. So,
possibly
apparently, yeah. So, but yeah, I'm sure Peter would have been. He's quite a big character himself, so that would have been interesting.
But I think, would you say, coming back to what we were talking about with the apprentices, the trainees, and the academies, do you think it's maybe teaching them in a teaching environment, 13-year-olds, 13, 14, 15, 16, obviously, not so it's too late when they get 16, 17. Oh, sorry, you're not going to quite make it. We've got to let you go. Give them the skill set from I'm talking school element now, opportunity of, I'm going to steal it from the curriculum now, the GCSE, the options.
Mm.
If you don't quite make it, say option A is, well, we use Manchester United because it's my favourite team as well, but we use United. That's your option A. Option B, you don't quite make it, so you might be stuck in the reserves, and that's as far as you're going to go, but you still get to live out your fantasy of playing for that club. Or option C, you got to kind of find opportunities in pastures greener. You've got maybe have to go to another Premier League team. You might have to drop down a level. You might have to go overseas. And it's an opportunity. It's not you are, I'm going to use your words. You're not a failure to yourself because you've not fulfilled your ambition. And you don't have to represent the club. It's just a different opportunity. You're still going to be able to fill your career that probably thousands and thousands of fans would like to do on a daily basis, weekly basis when they watch football. But you have to do it somewhere else. Do you think it's educating the player that way?
It's a weird thing, really, because you could look in hindsight. My mum asked me the question. My dad actually even asked me quite recently. Actually, if you had your time again, would you have done exactly the same? And so, like, I supported Man U so much that even though there was other clubs, and you look at it, like you say, quite rationally, and think, you probably got a better chance of moving through and stuff there. But I'd be still turning Man U down. So there was, if Man U hadn't come in for me and it was like Liverpool, it might be different because I wasn't a Liverpool fan. So I know Liverpool did contact me. So it might have been, Liverpool. I haven't got that pull towards Liverpool. And then you've got I was really close to signing for like Norwich and Wolves, who were, I know they're in the, Wolves in the Premiership now, but I think they were more like the division below, and great. They both had great youth structures, good, history, like Bellamy and Norwich, and you had people like Robbie Keane and Wolves. But I don't think, how it is when you're a kid. It's, for me, the more important thing was when you go on this journey, you realise that you're not Rhodri, the footballer, you're Rhodri, the person who has expressed himself through football. Because suddenly, like people are starting to know me, like other people will be going like Rhodri, the place Man U, Rhodri the footballer, Rhodri footballer, and I still got it for a while after he'd even retired. He's like, do you still play football? Super football, and it is difficult, because even and you can get caught up in this bubble without realizing that. I think that's why maybe a lot of maybe players who've sports people who've finished their careers struggle, because it's that sense of identity. You've been so wrapped up in that sport. Suddenly you're like, well, who am I now? And for me, it's been more of a, what about when you strip all that away? Well, it just gives you that little bit of a divide. You have to practice that kind of mindset, really, because it is easily to get wrapped up, especially you're impressionable, and especially for parents as well, who might be wide-eyed a little bit, in these bright lights. That's one thing I would have said is, remember if someone had said to me, Roger, this is just practicing yourself. And if someone had said to me then, those thoughts that you have, they come and go. A lot of it's through your conditioning and stuff. Don't listen to that voice in your head so much, because honestly, I think that would have helped. Because honestly, when I had thoughts in the head, I thought it was some inherent weakness in me without realizing, can't control a lot of these thoughts. They just come and go. That's why, I know someone like LeBron James has been very active. I know he's fronting like the meditation calm app, because he said it feels weird to stop, but you just sit there. And a lot of people go, I can't meditate, because you don't want to sit with these thoughts, because you've distracted yourself so much. And then you actually see, and if you be open and curious, non-judgmental, I don't even like the word meditation. For me, it's like non-judgmental attention to what is. And you actually see, it's like, oh yeah, that thought I had, it just comes and goes. And if you don't but I was a bit like, these thoughts are coming, and then I was like a rabbit down the hole trying to battle with these thoughts instead of, like you said, I agree with what you said about halfway between fear and joy. You can't have joy without fear. They're both part of the same thing. You wouldn't have fear without the joy. So it's letting everything flow, but not coming at things from fear. So accepting fear. So what when stuff happens, a lot of it, our initial gut reaction, our instinct is to run away from things, push things away. I don't want to feel that fear. I don't want to feel that, but you have to not be curious about it. What's this trying to show me? You let it flow through you a little bit, and that's a skill. You can practice that. But like you said, for some people, it can be the other way. They block out joy. They block out gratitude. They block out that, and then they want to live in fear. So I think everyone's looking at this other way. But and I think for periods of my life, I've blocked out joy, and I've just looked at fear and just operated from there without. So I think, like you say, it's all part of the same emotions. You wouldn't feel happiness without sadness. Tears of joy and tears of sadness come from the same eyes. And for years I thought, I'm robotic. I'm not going to let these flow of emotions. And don't get me wrong, you might have to, some stuff will come up, from your subconscious and everything. But for years, I just try and bat everything away, be a robot. And then what if I welcome everything? What if I accept everything? And what if I just, when I'm having these thoughts, what if I just center myself in my stomach, and then suddenly your mind goes a little bit quieter, and it was just a process of exploration. And this part of the psychological fitness specialist is to do with this. It's looking at life from a deeper state of consciousness. There's nothing wrong with ego and stuff, but trying to live from a place that you're not so tied in, you're not wrapped in, and you're not living life on autopilot. So, for example, if you're angry at someone, you're not doing it from a place of just reacting. You're doing it more from a place of, right, you're more aware. Meditating helps with this. You can see, it just gives you a split second. Am I going to react or respond? How am I going to respond here? And then, don't get me wrong, for that situation, anger might be what you need and what would help. I'm not saying anger's bad or anything like that bad, but it's just being able to control your mind state in each moment. Now, that can take practice. because circumstances in life, don't get me wrong, no man's an island, but a lot of what happens in life is inherently neutral, but it's our perceptions of things that shapes life. So ultimately, all you can do in life is change your inner experience, and you can do that in any situation, but you have to be accepting of, like you said, like every emotion.
Do you think I'm, to a certain extent, not giving them a fair crack? Because obviously it's a very complex issue, because it's probably, you can't answer it, I can't answer it, the football team can't answer it, the player can't answer it. Do you think it's that it comes down to the individual seeking what's best for them in the long run? And obviously they're going to be a little bit more astute, because we're learning probably on a daily basis of, well, how you talk to yourself, how somebody else talks to the other individual, and how you actually absorb content. You can have a detrimental effect. You talked about trauma, and it's probably the massive one. People will know of PTSD with the military, and I was speaking to somebody on Facebook Messenger, and they were saying, "Oh, I've got childhood PTSD." So, they called it the acronym CPTSD. So I've never heard about that before. Tell me more about it, because I want to know. I want to learn about trauma in the childhood. Thinking, well, how many people have had trauma? And I know I spoke to a psychologist a few episodes prior about this. She doesn't like to use mental health in a bad way, because ultimately it's not a disease. It's people need support. It's not you are mentally ill, or you're just inherently lost, if we use it loosely. But then what is mental health? Because nobody is perfect, or nobody is normal when it comes to their brain, because be it childhood trauma of, I don't know, be sexually abused, you name it, the list is endless, to ultimately what you and I are talking about, of sport being the trauma of actually derailing your life. Because you talked about ultimately athletes not being able to find themselves, and one of those people is when I got to my end in my career 7 years ago. And what do I do now? Because I'm inherently lost. Sport was pretty much everything that I talked about, everything that I did, everything revolved around sport. People probably find that very hard to believe. And I was lost. It was like, well, I went into education for a little bit, didn't like that. There's goods and bads of it. I'm not saying it's not all bad. There's some good experiences that I've been able to use and use into business, and they've been massively advantageous and will serve my business long term, because I know what teenagers think like when they become adults. Like, well, I know what they were like as teenagers. Boom, I can target to you quite easily, because I know how to talk to you, because I had to take some of that abuse on a daily basis. There's probably a lack of respect a little bit, because there's no consequences. I'm not saying that's every school, but obviously that's what sport taught you. That's what sport taught me. There is consequences if you do not do as you're told. And ultimately my premise to this is stigma is not a great thing across the board, because it's an opinion and it's an assumption of. We talked about this, off air, of Professor Xavier and X-Men, of people would like to have that superpower. I wouldn't, and I don't think you would either. I don't want to be inside your head on a good day, let alone a bad day, because you're talking about thoughts. You've got enough to deal with. And I think the grey one that the psychologist talked about, the subconscious, if we had to think about just breathing and keeping the heart beating, gosh, you think you'd be bombarded with information. So we don't have to do that. But what people need to be conscious and aware of is what they're consuming, be it on their phone, be it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, news outlets, because you are inadvertent probably to manipulating yourself and brainwashing yourself, because you had, I'll go out on a limb and say he's probably the greatest manager of all time, Alex Ferguson. It's true, because people still talk about Fergie time now, and he's been retired almost 10 years, maybe even more. Of it. It's not, he didn't create it. He had an aura of presence about him to ultimately probably intimidate the referee to give more time. Well, you've not given us a lot in the game. You know, to extend that period out so we can either win the game or get a draw. And ultimately, it's probably intimidating probably for the other teams. Like, oh, it's got to 90 minutes. We might have to play an extra 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and we might slip up. But ultimately, that's your thoughts, isn't it? It's like you're being manipulated from the external, and you're not actually focused on the here and now. And you had mentioned neutral thinking, ultimately. Is that because of Trevor Marwood's book that you mentioned, Neutral Thinking?
No, it's not. It's not because of his book, but it's because I've been experimenting with different things, and then I was like, what works for me? You know, it's, you know, sometimes when, yeah, you might just read a book and something throws a light on something you haven't thought about. But you know, sometimes when you read the book and, oh, that's the kind of stuff that I've been doing anyway, just intuitively. But it does make, you know, yeah, you can only change your own experience, but then why not make it easier for yourself and surround yourself with things that's not going to trigger you? That's not saying that you don't accept those things, but when you've got conscious control over certain things, you know, what you might do is you go through life, and then some people that you resonated with 15 years ago, and your paths have just gone different way. You've just developed in different ways. Is that? But sometimes people are holding on to things without realizing that you've maybe just developed. There's no right, you know, judgment on anyone else. It's just, that's life. Everyone develops in different ways, and like you said, everyone's different. So everyone's maps of the world are different, and your maps are always changing, aren't they? And then, you know, that's why sometimes when you meet someone you resonate with, because your maps are quite similar, but that's not to say you don't respect someone else whose map's a little bit different. You know, you've only got access to your own view of the world, but it can be scary. That's why I think we're so quick to look for authority figures, and then you realize, like you said about childhood development, that you're soaking up so much in your subconscious. When you're young, when your conscious mind's not really developed. That's why they say a lot. There's the old quote, like, "Show me the boy and I'll show you the man," because that's what they do. A lot of people are reliving their patterns from youth, but in more sophisticated ways. They don't want to feel like lonely or don't want to feel left out, and I think the key thing in life is once you start aware of your patterns and aware that your belief is just a belief. Like, I see some people, like, they're convinced that their belief is true and everyone thought that like them and the world would be perfect. But what is perfect? Everyone's different, and that's what makes life unique. But what I'd say is everyone's a different expression, but be clear what your expression is. And I think that's what resonates when you see someone who's been authentic and who's got their kind of guard down, because I think it resonates with people, because so many people feel like they can't be authentic. So when someone puts a guard down, you see the other people start putting their guard down. Because for years I'd gone around like thinking, oh God, everyone else seems to have it together. Must be something wrong with me. And then suddenly they've seen me. I'm not saying just because I've opened up, but then suddenly you see, people are just, I'm struggling, or not even struggling, or just, I'm just not fully engaged with life. It's this feel of, like you said, about being present. You hear this thing, like, you've got no choice but to be here now. That's the only choice you've got, but part of your mind is living through memory and living for a future that you don't even know. You're trying to predict the future that you don't know what's going to happen. So, but we don't like unpredictability. So you've only got here now, but there's so many things that will pull you out to that. Like your beliefs and you feel like then you've got to distract yourself. So it's easy to say. In practice, it takes practice, and that's me. Like, I'm not saying meditation is the answer for everyone, because you can be meditating for 20 minutes a day, and then I've done much meditating. But for me, it's trying to be meditative. It's trying to find ways to bring you back to present. You could be, had a great day in work, but then you're taken home and you're still in your work head when you went to with your family. You're not present. So for me, it's, when someone says like mentally strong, well, you could be mentally strong like, I don't like the term, but you could mean you're mentally strong in one area of your life, but then you go home and you're taken out on your kids because you're still carrying energy and stress. So for me, it's like more about mentally skillful, mentally flexible, adaptive. So it's kind of flow. I mean, I know Bruce Lee was like, he's well known for his martial arts, but he's not as well known for his philosophy. But a lot of his, like, when he's like, be like water, and I'm like, well, yeah, if someone had said to me like 20 years ago, I'd be like, well, what's that all about? But then you kind of say, yeah, if you let things flow. I always thought, like, flow, this state would just be something I'd experienced in football when I was on the football pitch, when everything would just flow. But suddenly you see you are capable of doing it in life, but it's the ability to be present. And then suddenly, if you are really tuned in to what you're doing right now, simple things can become really fascinating. They can really, I, for instance, don't really get bored nowadays, because I find sometimes you could be doing something. Let's say you go on like an amazing holiday on paper, but you're taking your mind with you and you're not present. Well, you could have a better time just in your back garden, totally and really in tune. It is the state of mind, like you say. It's a weird thing, really. But I think, you experiment with yourself and go with what you're inexperienced, not what, like, sometimes we're quick to say, well, the science says it does this. But yeah, okay, yeah, that valid, that might give you an idea of what's going on. But how do you feel like when you're just really tune in, and what are those things then, those beliefs that are just pulling you away? It might be little addictions, like social. The big thing for me is probably the phone, the pull of just like, you check it. I've just checked this 2 minutes ago, and it's pulling you away. And once you're aware of what you're like, your kryptonite is in a way, those things that are pulling away, then suddenly you strip away, and then you're more comfortable with life as it is. It doesn't take your edge. You're still ambitious, but for me now, I accept reality as it is, whilst trying to change it. I mean, but as I say, that path is different for everyone. But it's up to you to kind of find that out. Really, I mean, I didn't want to get to a life where you're on your deathbed and you don't know when that'll be. You don't know when your time will be at. But I don't want to be thinking, why was I worried about this? Or why didn't I just try and tune in and do? You've only got here now, and as I say, we always think like, oh yeah, well, I'll do it tomorrow. You don't know when this life's going to end, and I think we all live. I've been guilty. You live each day thinking, well, I'm immortal here. You know what I mean? You always think, like, death is what happened to someone else. Why not you? It could happen to you any moment.
Well, I think it's embracing. Well, you and I are both Welsh. And we'll get the. I'm not going to say it, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The English rude term, but I've used it as a piece of content of, instead of being like a sheep mentality, which both following the herd or following the flock in this case, why don't you embrace being different, being unique, and being the black sheep, and take it on board? Because obviously that's a stigma of, you didn't want to be the black sheep of the group. What's so bad about being, if it's ultimately it suits you and it works with you, makes you happy, that's on somebody else. If you don't like where I'm going, okay, maybe we're supposed to drift apart. That's hard.
I mean,
that's hard because you've got to internalize that.
It's so hard because I think, primarily we're designed to want to survive and be part of the tribe, even if that's pulling you away from where you really feel like calling to go. So, like you say, I never compare myself to anyone else, because what you only see a little snippet of someone else anyway. You know, when someone says, I want to be how do I play like this person? They're like, well, you're never going to play like that person. You have got access to what really makes them tick. Yeah, you can study someone's technique and like copy how someone takes a free kick or someone takes a free throw in basketball, but you can only be yourself. That's a job in itself, because you're stripping away a lot of conditioning, a lot of misguided beliefs that you've had, and why not be the black sheep? I mean, you can only be yourself, and I think really in the world is full of black sheep. Just people think they're in this flock all the time, but yeah.
Well, that's probably when I've embraced it. I've not used black sheep in content, but I've used the mindset of sheep. Somebody's done that for me as a quote. I've said it. Okay, let's own it. I'm okay. I'm actually content on being on the outside. I've never been clearer on who I am, what I stand for. Ultimately, I never thought I fit in a box anyway, but be it through study, lecturers have reiterated, it's like, James, you don't fit into a box, you fit into multiple boxes. And I'd probably go out on even further than that now and say, I will choose when I go into a box. That's in itself is probably, I could call it overconfidence, some person could call it arrogance, but ultimately I am so in tune with me, I turned it, and ultimately the guests actually laughed at this. It's like seek and destroy. You know, people of disruption. You either got people that are trying to create havoc, or these people don't like being called disruptors, but be it you're doing something different, and people are, okay, I like that. I like what you're doing. You're doing something different. But no, they're being themselves. They don't want to fit into what's in this melting pot because it doesn't work. It's like, well, I don't want to be, coming back to your point, Rhodri, of comparison. I'm not going to try and replicate myself to be, in my case, people say who was my role model as a kid. As they said, Ryan Giggs. Obviously now 30 years on, almost. I know he's got mixed race heritage, father's black. I didn't see that. So be it the psychologist in the episode previous to yours said why white men succeed is because they got role models, and in every state of society. Well, I proved that theory to be bollocks because I thought Ryan Giggs was white. Thus, I wanted to have some sort. I didn't want to be him. I wanted to replicate his success in my own identity. To use Kobe Bryant's one of the quotes he said when he was alive, I don't want to be the next Michael Jordan, I want to be the next Kobe Bryant. But people need to obviously take that and actually live it, because it's true. Ultimately, he's probably one of the most renowned figures in and outside of basketball, because who he was going to do, if he had to do more than everybody else, he's going to do it. If we're going to work, if you do, I think, what was it? One person did an hour before a game. He said to I can't remember which basketball player it was. He asked him, why did you stay longer than I did? I stayed until you stopped, thus to make a point. And then I think he ended up dropping 60 points on that team that night. I was going to outwork you both physically and, more importantly, psychologically. And you could probably say that's why Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant are, in a sense, ruthless in sport, because they were going to do whatever it took beyond everybody else. Most people are like that. I know I wasn't. But people have to remember that. You know, the status quo of, you know, self-development, you must wake up at 4:00 in the morning. Why?
Yeah. No.
Because I don't do that. I think maybe sport, maybe 6:00. Don't do it. And people ask, well, would you do that again? I would do it. I would relive the life, like you said earlier in the episode. Yes. not now. I don't want to have a full-time job of training 30 hours a week because it doesn't fit right now. I'm not saying I couldn't do it. It just doesn't fit to the person I am now. I've learned probably a lot from it.
You know, when you say about that, but what I find a lot of people I see are they're head down sprinting, and they don't take that time to reflect and actually, you know, you could be sprinting in the wrong direction. I know you don't quite know because that's why, you know, we're quick to look for authority figures. I want to be like that person because it's so unknown. You're trying to look for this fast track success. Like, give me 5 tips. Give me 5 tips. And like, if you went to you that's something inherent in something like Kobe. You know, like they're not. They probably feel like outsiders because they're just you know, like you say, they're not in a box and they're just being themselves. It's a skill, you know. It's like
well, it's hard. It's ultimately. Yeah. I've been asked probably a few times of late, what do you see for yourself? Okay, I don't know, but I'm not scared of it. And that's probably the first time since my sporting days that I thought like that, of, you know, the early days of probably you at 16 and me at 15. But I want to climb this ladder, but I'm not scared to do it. We'll just see what happens as we go along the journey. Whereas I think it's where, you know, dreams and reality blur a little bit. People have dreams and aspirations that they want to do something, and I'll wait till tomorrow. Okay, now is no time like the present to do it. You could follow the narrative of it's all doom and gloom, which I kind of give solutions, even to when I'm watching people moaning about the news as our industry is going under. Okay, evolve. How could you be? I don't know. I won't single them out exclusively, but be the entertainment industry. Invest in cameras, thus you expand your capacity when it is safe to do so. Then you can have large scale events. There you go. You're more profitable. Sports is probably a big one. You could live stream, there already is pay-per-view service anyway, be it Sky, BT, NBA Access, be it the American sports. You pay for the privilege to watch it live. Maybe allow the leagues further down to be able to charge their fan base the opportunity to watch their team from a seat perspective. Because I bet you people would do it. It's like, I want to see my team, and I see it from my seat, or however they do it, like a stand perspective seat, fan experience, like the NBA did in the bubble. People will probably jump on it. So I give the semi-professional and the lower league teams a chance to actually have some revenue. But ultimately, that rugby's done it, because I think I definitely saw the Ospreys. I think I got an email. It was going to be free for that one, but they were going to give a service for their fans to be able to see it from a different perspective. Of the be it they'll show it instead of it being on. It might be one of the games that wasn't televised.
Yeah,
that's a bit forward thinking. So I think people need to be a little bit more open to that. I think I got that bit, but obviously with the Ospreys doing something that is open-minded, I think people need to take that into perspective as think openly, take each piece of information. It's not gospel, even if you don't agree with what you and I have got to say. It's just 2 opinions. You could have a third one. And then obviously make a what's the word I want to say? A conclusion based on what you think. So you might agree with something that you've said, Rhodri, something that I said, and then you sprinkle a little bit your own little seasoning on top. and I've created my own. Well, we've kind of discouraged his beliefs a little bit, but it'll be a little bit of your identity. And I'm reading a massive book right now by James Clear it's in front of me, but I can't read it.
The Atomic Habits.
The Atomic Habits.
Yeah,
I've obviously been a naughty boy and I've cheated. I've skipped into that chapter because I was fascinated about the habits and the identity. Because
the systems, isn't it? Yeah.
It's most people are results focused, results driven, and ultimately work the other way around. So it'll be 1, 2, 3 results, process, identity. Where what you and I are probably getting people to challenge, go from identity it's very difficult, but because it's challenging yourself, process, result. But your identity is the habit. And that's a difficult thing to do because most people, and I've used that system to be able to actually challenge people in work recently. It's like, well, I didn't use identity because I thought that would kind of go blow their mind if I was to use it. But are you results driven or are you process driven? Obviously the athlete depends. It's one or the other. But does the result challenge your identity or does the process challenge your identity? I would probably argue yes, because you said a lot of athletes, when they get to their career, don't know who they are. I've epitomized that. I did something that was only 10 years of my life. Okay, what do I do? What do I do? Where do I fit in now? That's obviously unpreparedness. I could have prepared better for retirement than I did. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. But I was challenging my identity. There was nothing wrong with the sports identity that I had, and thus talking to loads of people. This comes back to another book, Brendan Bouchard's one of High Performance Habits. There's probably a theme coming here of books that I have with habits. But his is obviously the 3 C's to improving confidence. Let's see if I can remember. Connection, congruency, and competence. So if we use it in a different sense, repetition, identity, and where you fit in. So I use a different language. It technically says it. Obviously the identity is the most difficult. I deem myself to be Rhodri the footballer, James the athlete. I'm no longer in that space of people. I don't fit in. That's not true. You're probably the most prepared people, and I think majority of listeners are athletes. You've got an advantage over everybody else. We are probably the most prepared individuals because, as you know, you're self-employed, so am I. Business likes to portray itself as an equal to sport. Sport doesn't think of that like business. Sport knows it's a business, but it doesn't think of the business in the same way. Technically, we think, well, I'll go out on a limb here and say sport probably, it deems itself to be better than big business. You see tangibles related to athletes. I don't. I'm not scared of a business person. Ultimately, it's a mindset. You and I are probably very similar in terms of character traits.
Yeah.
Of always people pleasing, always deeming not to be enough. There's probably a trust issue there a little bit under the surface.
Yeah.
That's hard because ultimately I don't want to let people in. I'm not gonna make assumptions here. I'm gonna use me. I'm not gonna let people in because you might hurt me, or I'm gonna have bad experiences based on the narrative that I'm telling myself on something that happened before. Of what's the theory called? Because actually I googled it because it was on television, like a drama program. It was one of these drama 911 programs, like about fire brigade, and he didn't want to relive a traumatic experience of losing his whole crew to I'll say it's a gas explosion, but it wasn't to that extent, but it was rural, so farming, so a fertilizer explosion. And it's a Zeigarnik effect. It's obviously not wanting to relive negative experiences. But I've also found a sporting sense of it. But this is Wikipedia, so I'd take this with a pinch of salt. Obviously, an NBA analysts have done it for basketball, and people fouling people, and then people just chucking the ball up. It's obviously the Harden effect. It's like, well, he's not the only one. I'm probably could think of Russell Westbrook does it as well. As like, well, they're going to get fouled, so they just chuck it up in the air because they know they're going to get the whistle, albeit, the footballer. I'll use the narrative of now. I think I'm going to get touched or I'm going to fall over in the box. Even though if you'd have stayed on your feet, you might have scored. So it's a narrative of it's already played out before it's happened. So the referee's going to blow the whistle anyway, because he deems they've made a meal of it. So there must have been contact. Thus, in a sense, this is where the grey area is in every sport. It's cheating 101, but you're told to do whatever you can to win. But at what cost? Because ultimately this is going to challenge your identity. Because if you cheated for so long of I need to do whatever it takes to win, well, that's just a shortcut. In if we were to use, I'll use Amazon because it's the easiest one to use. Them shortcutting with their algorithm for their Swedish one, instead of paying somebody that was Swedish to translate it from English to Swedish. They've used Google. I don't think it's Google Translate, but something of that equivalent, an AI algorithm, which is a shortcut. Thus, come unstuck, and this is funny. So people, if they haven't read it, this is hilarious. This was for I think it was a cockerel or something like that, as a decoration. Yeah. This turned into ultimately describing this thing as male genitalia. Right. So people probably, you should probably still buy it, but where LinkedIn said it was bad for Amazon, I'm thinking, well, that's probably good publicity. It's bad. It's not good publicity, but it's still publicity because they're still in front and center in people's consciousness. Because if it hadn't been for something bad, somebody might not have been seeing Amazon, and then obviously they go from there. But my point is habits are not set in stone. If it's results orientated, you might need to maybe look at it a little bit harder, because how long term is it going to be? So if I use weight loss, I want to lose 10 pounds, 10 kilos. I'm not going to use 10 stone because that's like ginormous, but just for the numerical substance of it, what's the overall outcome of it? Because like we've said all along, if you don't enjoy the process, you haven't got recall. And I nearly dropped in a film there, reference there. Total recall. You haven't got historical data to look back upon when you have tough times. Thus, if you go a little bit deeper and challenge your identity to change, you will change as a person, because the process will happen overnight and you'll get the outcome because you have changed. But ultimately, why that is difficult, it's probably because the person doesn't want to change. That's a different topic altogether.
Yeah, it's the weird one. When someone says they want to change can be tough. Like to properly change. They say a lot of circumstances to properly change, part of you sometimes has to die. You know, like people can know that sometimes something isn't right for them because it's familiar, because it's known. There's reassurance in that familiarity, but that's what I'm saying. Like if you to change your identity, to flow from an identity, it's always unfamiliar. Like you say, you're like, well, like I know, for instance, I went from footballer to being a filmmaker. Yeah, obviously I've got like I've been used to performance, but there was a bit of imposter syndrome. I'm a bit like, Christ, I was more comfortable, you know, like meeting, you know, Eric Cantona than I was like meeting some actors for the first time, because I was like, well, yeah, I'm from that background, football, you know, even though, you know, they were way ahead of what I had achieved, but then I'm like a fish out of water, and then you think like, but then you just think, when imposter syndrome with it, but then you're like, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to get found out here, but then you just take steps that you, like you say, it's like, you know, when he said about the process, I remember in that book, James Clear said, if you say I'm a writer, then just write 2 minutes every day. Then you can say I'm a writer. Because I write every day. So if someone says like, oh, I'm just pulling at strings of it. Someone says, oh, I'm a swimmer, but you're not jumping in the water every day. Then at what point do you say, well, I'm not a swimmer? So it's a case of like not being too attached to your identity, but like, you know, like for instance, you know, I wrote a book last week. It's in Welsh language, so it'll be, you know, limited to that audience. But you know, I'm a writer, and then the part of me, well, I've never written a book before, but write every day, and what you know, you've got a publisher who wants you to put your book, and then you're a writer. Same with business. You know, I've got a business degree. I haven't really used it. You know, I don't really need a business degree to direct actors. But then I felt a pull now. Oh, it wasn't a case of business. I'm just going to set up a business. I'm not really passionate about the process. So actually, I feel a pull. I'm really passionate about psychological fitness. Then, yeah, maybe I'm a businessman because I'm doing something to work on my business every day. You know, it's. But like you said, you know, change is not for everybody. You know, for some people, that, you know, that familiarity every day, even, but all I'd say to them is be aware. If you've got that like that gut instinct says, oh, you need to do something different, and you're blocking that voice every day, then you've got no arguments if you get to the end of your life and you go, well, what if? No, what if? I don't want to live a life of what if, because by then, you know, that's why I don't really. Yeah, you obviously learn from stuff in life, but I don't look back and regret and in hindsight, because what you did at that certain moment in time happened because it happened, because that's what happens, you know, like that's why you know, someone says, I wish I'd gone away, wish I'd followed that job. I said, but you didn't, because the pull of that wasn't strong enough to pull you out. So that's what I'm saying. Like some people, you know, they'll live an amazing life in what could have been, but unfortunately that's not how life works. You've kind of got to make it happen, really, unfortunately, you know, that responsibility lies in you. Yeah, you might have like, yeah, you know, you might have lucky breaks. You bump into the person at the right time in life, but I think there's a whole, you know, I think there's a different ways of saying it, but like, you know, some stuff happens accidentally in life, but practice makes you accident prone, and I do believe that, you know, you keep at it, and you don't you know, don't let that voice in your head, oh, I'm no good for this. You just kind of like, yeah, park that. I'm aware of it, but just like, well, I feel this pull that's a bit stronger, and then you know, the world's not saying the world's your oyster, but it's things can open up then. But for things to open up, you might have to open up, you know, open up your world a little bit.
Well, it's a chance to discover what you didn't know about yourself, what you didn't know about other people. Ultimately, you and I touched base months ago about doing this recording long time ago. That episode would have been completely different to what we're doing right now. If we touch base again in another 6 months, be different. And I think where people have got to do it here and now is embrace that, because you talked about that domino effect. I'm probably experiencing that with work. It's like everything seems to be going in my favor, irrespective of what's happening outside. But I'm choosing to ultimately, as and when I want information, if it doesn't serve me, park it, because I don't particularly want to feel that emotion. I'll embrace it because you and I been in the same boat. If you can't hold that thing at arm's length so long, it comes down like a ton of bricks, and ultimately it's gonna win. It's just a matter of time when you want to deal with it. Do you want to deal with it when it's small, or do you want to deal with it when it's enormous? And I've probably done it both. The one that was a little bit tiny, it was okay. It wasn't pleasant. The one that was like a ton of bricks, that was tough. That was hard because there's a lot of demons I had to overcome. But I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, I've experienced both ways, and I honestly say, my waking up experience. Yeah, I've talked about when I was in my 20s, and what happened with me is I had to retire, and I was playing semi-professionally, doing pretty well, and yeah, obviously because my knee couldn't withstand full-time professional football anyway, I think, but I had to retire when I was 24, and the consultant went to me, Rod, you've got the knee of a 50-year-old ex-footballer at 24. Now, he might as well have just said, Rod, you're worthless. Because that's how I took it. So even then, I was like, I succeeded in getting into TV and, becoming successful. It was still from a point of like, oh, you're worthless. And I was trying to fill this hole. Then I'm thinking, right, oh God, this is just emptiness. I'll be all right. Once I get married, I have 2 kids. So I get married and yeah, I'm really happy with my wife. But I'm still trying to patch this up externally. And then I have 2 kids, and then I was trying to push. I was basically, I tell you what I was doing. I was working on a documentary on Flex Lewis, who was he's a champion bodybuilder.
Oh, you made that then? I've watched that.
Yeah,
for anyone who's not watched it, it's amazing.
Well, no, there's a funny one. I did a Welsh language one. It was a back-to-back, and I was doing the English one, right? And I was pushing myself so hard, and there was certain instances where the company was waiting for, and I just had my second son newborn. I was pushing myself, and I was meant to go out to Vegas and Florida to film with him, and we got on really great with him. But I remember I was on the way to work one day, and I just rang my dad in tears. I disconnected so much, and I was just burning out. So he said, Rod, go to the doctor. So I went straight to the doctor. And I said, yeah, I'm just having dark thoughts because I'm just trying to deflect and just trying to find outside. And she went, obviously she's running through the protocol. What do I do here? They got there 15 minutes. In all fairness, it's a big ask for a GP to do that. And she said, oh, would you act on them? And I went, oh, no, I've got, 2 wonderful boys and a wonderful wife. And she's like, yeah. You're talking about, again, externally, not you yourself. What about if you didn't have them? And I honestly woke up and I thought, you know what? I've always thought it's selfish to put myself first and really do the inner work. I'd been dabbling with meditating, but I think with meditating, I was more approaching from, I've got to be the world's best meditator. I've got to nail this, which is probably not the greatest approach to meditating. And just as a part of me think, you know what? The most selfless thing you can do is really do your inner work. It was a case of this, and bearing in mind now, it did help me at the time. When I retired in my 20s, I was massively into Stoic philosophy, but I become quite robotic and just trying to think, I'm not going to get hurt again. I'm just going to I'm still going to achieve externally, but I'm just going to put this little image out there. And that, and then I was like, you know what? I was in that GP room, came out and goes, you're going to have to try something different here. You're going to have to look out for yourself. And what about letting all these emotions flow and stuff? And that's where I've got to is that place of just acceptance. Well, what it means, I don't know if it's the same for you. I'm not not walking around with a smile every day, but I'm at peace with things as they are, whilst trying to change it. Because for years I was just trying to like just get everything in its right place, so I didn't have to feel not good. You know what I mean? It's just this feeling, and a lot of people only reach, a lot of people sometimes reach that point through crisis or something major happens in life. But I'm like, well, what if it doesn't have to reach that place before you kind of just develop maybe a deeper appreciation for life, which maybe I'd kind of overlooked for a bit. I'll be honest with you.
But then it probably comes back to this, Rod, what we talked about ages ago. Comfort. People, COVID's a massive example of that. People wanted to change. They saw the benefit in exercise if they weren't doing it already, because that was your only form of exercise, going outside the house. But I've seen things revert back to type. It's like slowly and surely. Ultimately, this is meditation that allows you that awareness to see clearly. Yeah. I'm able to see the bigger picture. Like, well, I forecasted what's happening now months ago. It's like, well, people are going to get back to comfort because it's easy. It's the status quo. I want to get back to normality of 2019. You talked about uncertainty and ultimately what it brings every single day. COVID's proven that. Tomorrow is not granted to anybody. And ultimately, you have to, because I'll speak to people that, I'm bored, I've had enough of this. Well, spare a thought for the people that lost people and their families. That person is no longer with us. I put a post out yesterday for Armistice Day that I told you off air of thanking the service members now and yesteryear, be it World War I, World War II, and ultimately we stopped clapping after a while because I guess I think there's a picture of the actual person that they'd had enough. The people in the NHS are still going. They're probably pretty much in burnout. They're probably working on fumes. So I put a post on underneath that. Thank you for your sacrifice, because if you don't go to go into your job every single day, what state will we be in right now? And ultimately, I said key workers, periods, albeit, the delivery drivers, just a regular everyday person. Thank you. Because society has forgotten. I haven't, and I never will do. And ultimately, I'm doing it on a bigger scale than Facebook because I'm doing it on a podcast, so it can go viral. It can go not viral, global. But sport has become more important than it thinks it is, and I'm a sports person saying this. But football is not the end. Is not the be all and end all. Any sport is not the be all and end all. I think that's struck a chord with a lot of people because I've made a point. It's like this shouldn't be. I referenced the NFL on Instagram. It was their first game of the season. They shouldn't be playing. Somebody thought I was talking about Black Lives Matter. No, I'm talking a lot bigger than that. Yes, it's important. I was talking of life in general. Sport is not bigger than people's lives. Okay, it's $1 probably $1 billion industry. Don't get me wrong. Ultimately, money is always going to win when it comes to that. And if people don't believe that, you got the wool pulled over your eyes. But we need to remember that we were clapping, yes, to make ourselves feel good and to show our solidarity. But that is what society is built upon. The haves, the have-nots. Thus, doctors, nurses should be paid more than they are. Ultimately, it's self-worth, because what you mentioned. Because that ultimately is a different argument of the footballer being paid 100 grand a week plus. You didn't get that, I know that. But I wouldn't turn it down if that was me. that's ultimately self-worth. If I deem that I'm worth that much money and somebody's willing to pay me it, but that's where we've got what's wrong of, the us and them of sports being allowed to play when we're still in a pandemic. Films are being made. Entertainment's still happening. What's the knock-on consequences for I know people can't see my hands, but over here, what's it going to impact on the NHS or anybody that we love by having, in a sense, all of these things is entertainment. It's for the betterment of, to make you feel good. But if you did the actual work yourself, you wouldn't need this.
Yeah. That's something, that sport can bring joy to people's lives, but it can also distract you from, if people show the same passion in their own lives, then you wouldn't maybe rely on sport for distraction. And like you said, maybe a lot of it with obviously I work in TV and obviously not big budget Hollywood films or anything, but they bring money, generate money, and sometimes we look at, we have to, we look a little bit too much in that direction. But it's funny when you said it, when you said about like people changing stuff, like about, how it is when someone like will read an inspirational book or they see an inspirational documentary, and there's the old thing, puts perspective on things, and like, a couple hours later you're back in your own patterns, because to change, you have to change something within yourself. What I was saying, like, inspirational book or documentary might throw a light on something, but that inspiration does wear off. You have to have like that inspiration from deep within, really, and then this just happening to that. And I mean, I agree with you. I mean, let's say, you had like let's say an alien got bumped down from space and was like came to watch a football game and said, well, like, everyone's crazy, like, what are these 22 guys just trying to kick the ball into this net? Same with rugby and stuff. But I know it's ingrained in our culture, and I'm a keen sports fan, but I don't, like you said, I think it fills a blank for too many people as well, where instead, you don't have to rely on sport to just enjoy it. It's a game. It's a game. It's not life or death, isn't it? I think, like you said, there's life or death is what
it's black or white. You can't get more black and white with that in life. But it's life. Yes, we like life. We don't want to contemplate death, but it's going to come for you. I know it's morbid, but ultimately there's a point to this. He's going to come, what's the dude's name? The Grim Reaper, going to come for you one time or another. But I think,
when he said morbid, so sorry to cut across.
But ultimately, I think what you echo there, Rhodri, is, people think before they act. If they did the opposite of acted before they think, they'd be a little bit closer to their goals. Because ultimately, if you just start walking that path, I'm doing it. I quite like that. Whereas if you think about it, and you and I probably have done it loads of times.
You'd never do anything, would you?
It's got to be perfect. It's not quite right. You're dragging you're putting self-doubt into yourself straight away. But and that's the vicious one in itself. But what were you going to say?
Yeah, when you said about I was just going to add to what you said about death. I don't think it's morbid at all, because in a lot of different philosophies say the meditating about your own death is the most powerful thing you can do, because it reminds you to take action now. Because that's what it has helped me. Sometimes I'll just think of myself on the deathbed and think, is a life I'm living now? Sometimes I think, if you wrote your own obituary, what would you want it to say in it? And sometimes thinking about death, a lot of all philosophical days, it would be about your life would be about how you die. Can you die virtuously, knowing that you've lived the life that you wanted to live. I mean, honestly, my only fear in the world, and not fear, but I wouldn't want to get to the end of my life and think I lived someone else's life, not mine. And you know, the clock's ticking down. You know, everyone's got to remember that. And I don't see that as like a scaremongering or anything. It's reality. Like I think people sometimes are scared of death. Why be scared of something that ultimately is unavoidable? It's going to come to us all. I'm not saying, you know, I've had periods where, you know, I wanted to end thinking, but I've always been fascinated by life, and you know, it's going to come to an end for all of us. So you can choose to be happy while it lasts. Now, being unhappy, whether you like it or not, is a choice. You know, or you look at what's making you unhappy and choose not to be. And sometimes we say, I'm not going to be unhappy. Then, you know, you let things flow a bit. It's not denying that there's going to be challenges in life. Everyone's going to go through life. You're going to lose someone that you love. I've lost people that I love, and unfortunately, you know, that's part of life. You wouldn't appreciate life if life went on forever. You wouldn't appreciate it because you just take it for granted. And I think I had that maybe like realization where like you just you have to engage fully with life, let everything flow, whatever that brings, you know. And I suppose you've had experiences in your life that just bring that into full color, maybe.
That moves me nicely to my penultimate question to ask you then, Rhodri, and one I like to ask every guest, is if you had to sit down with any athlete, dead or alive, for that matter, who would that be and why?
Dead or alive? Who's yours? It gives me time to think.
Oh, nasty.
Have we answered this before?
No, I've never. I pinched it off somebody else, but I've never been asked what would the athlete that I would want to sit down, dead or alive, and it's not one that you would think straight off the top of your head. Ooh, nice one, Rod. Because nobody's ever done that to me. Now people are going to get ideas. What would be mine? Any athlete that I would like to sit down with, dead or alive? Because we've been quite stoic. I'll go to the original dude, as we're going back thousands of years. The soldier that ran from Marathon back to Athens to tell the Athenians of their victory.
Oh, right.
Ultimately, obviously you were relaying a victory, but what was that like running 26.1 miles in probably flip flops? And I think, but that's me going very deep in terms of, okay, what's the culture like? It'd be quite cultural shock as well in terms of that you can't. Well, that's the modern day how the Olympics are created because of that one person. So that would be mine.
Yeah, that I don't think my answer is going to trump yours. I mean, probably I've had longer to think about it, but just because I saw a documentary last week, I don't know if it's been on recently, a Sky documentary on Muhammad Ali, and there's just something about him, wasn't there? Just the charisma and someone who was just free. Probably be him, just because I was just so mesmerised by the doc. I can't remember what it's called. I mean, I've seen the one about the Rumble in the Jungle before, but this was more like a autobiographical look at his life, and it just resonated. It's funny you talk about back in ancient times, because a book that threw a light for me was, it's not a sportsman, but it was he's obviously one of the Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, the old emperor of Rome. Like, he was arguably the world's most powerful man, and he wrote these like meditate. I picked the book because I thought it was going to be about meditating. Then I opened it and I was like, yeah, obviously culturally it's changed massively, but it was a lot about like the fears he had, the worries, and I was like, man, this is like we haven't changed as humans at all from this time. And for me, it was like to see someone who was the world's most powerful man just being open. The only thing that I took a bit of umbrage with when I found out that he didn't really write it to be, he wrote it for himself, and I think it was discovered and, and then it's passed down and being published. So in a way, would he have been so open if he knew people were going to read it? So in a way, when you read it, you're a little bit like, should I be reading it? But it did throw a light to me about, these powerful people and they have the same worries as everyone else. And I think once you realize, like, we're human, everyone's carrying something with them. Like, yeah, obviously some people build up more layers than others, and then that might hit into a wall. But welcome to being human, and I just think it's being able to embrace that by doing something about it, and then you realize everyone's in the same boat together. It's just everyone expresses themselves in different ways.
And my last question before we wrap up the episode is, if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
I'm just saying straight what came to my head. What came was learn to flow with life and not resist it.
So once again, Rhodri, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Welcome. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
That's my pleasure.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let Rhodri and I know what you thought of the episode by tagging us over on Twitter at Rhodri_G_Jones. So I'll spell that out for you. That's RHODRI_G_Jones. And at the usual, James O. Roberts 11. And again, I'll spell that out for you. That's JAMES, the letter O, ROBERTS, and the number 11. And again, you can do the same on Instagram and Facebook. And in addition, if you had any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And finally, don't forget to check Rhodri out on Twitter. And as always, don't forget to check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab Resources. But not forgetting, I've also started a new Facebook group, especially for the podcast, which you can find by typing in The Mindset Athlete. All the links will be in the descriptions. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.libsyn.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.